then I started to see other people all over social media going, I really want to write a book, but I don't know how. So there are things that have to happen in the chapter in order for the whole story to progress. But it's just those things, and I can play with the in between as much as I want to. So it's like a interesting combination of plotter and pantser that suddenly came with a character, an old man that just sprang to life, Athena like, fully formed out of my brain. They
Yeah.
come to me with a specific issue, and I have to create a way for them to grasp that issue and then practice that issue until it is no longer an issue.
Welcome to Spotlight on Indie SFF author interview. We are interviewing today Daniel P. Riley. He is a novelist, writing coach, and editor through his company Whimsyland, where you can find ebooks and services. Currently living in Pennsylvania, Daniel has devoted his life to literature as both a writer and aid to other writers learning the craft. For the last 4 years, he's written 7 books across various genres, worked with over 100 writers and creators, hosted 2 podcasts, failed at launching a comic book, and I got to hear more about that, and now has co-written a script for an independent film he will be co-directing this winter. And I got to hear about that too. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping everybody else is interested in that. A former teacher, Daniel has loved reading and storytelling forever, from reading to his daughter as she grew up, to reading for his own enjoyment, and finally pursuing a writing career as an independent author like so many others. In his scant spare time, he enjoys video games, movies, and the like, but tends to devote even that to the craft of storytelling. Daniel is the author of the Angel Ward trilogy, starting with Jizadai, which is listed on Spotlight on Indie SFF. His other works include Modern Horrors, Tales of Halcyon, Reforged, and Saints Go Marching, an illustrated children's series starting with Mary and Joseph. Links to follow Daniel will be included in the description of this video. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself if I left anything out.
Oh, no, that pretty much covers it. I've been a storyteller all my life, from being a child to tabletop role playing games. And then when I had my own daughter in my early 20s, I read to her every night as part of our bedtime routine. And then I'd read for myself when I was ready to go to bed a couple hours later. So it was always about reading and storytelling. And about when COVID hit was when I made the decision. Unfortunately, I had moved to Texas just before the COVID lockdowns occurred. And I had moved to Texas with the intention of writing my first novel, which was The Tales of Halcyon. And then the lockdowns happened. So I really had no choice because there was nothing else to do.
Right.
So, yeah, I literally fumbled my way through writing I guess probably we'd say novella length set of books in this Tales of Halcyon story that I came up with, and did it all without help. Like, I was just looking on the internet, trying to figure out how to do it, and leaning on what I understood of my English courses and my credentials. And after I was finished, it took me about a year and a half to work on 3 novellas. They're roughly 60,000 to 80,000 words, I think, each. And when I was finished, I went, okay, I've learned a lot from this, but it would have been a lot easier if somebody was around to help me. So I started looking on social media, and I found a couple of guys who also were writing novels, mostly in the lit RPG genre. And then I started to see other people all over social media going, I really want to write a book, but I don't know how. And I thought, okay, well, I figured it out. And I wanted a guide. I wanted somebody to bounce ideas off of and to kind of go, hey, you probably shouldn't do that to
Right.
make the
There's a lot of
process a
that.
little bit faster. So I was talking with my family, and it was my mother who suggested, well, why don't you consider, tutoring them? And I went, okay, creative writing tutoring. Well, what do I do with that? And that's where Whimsyland came from. It's just my want to help people write stories and do what I didn't have when I first started out.
So, what did you learn in that experience? What do you find that you pass on a lot to new writers?
Well, indie authors, a lot of us end up in the same boat, which is I have this really cool story and a kind of an idea of how I'm supposed to write, but it doesn't work out that way when you actually start getting it on the paper or on the document, as it were. Like I did, a lot of them, they get a page or two out and it ends up being a synopsis of a scene, and then the writer's block hits. And I often say on social media, writer's block doesn't actually exist. It's a combination of a lack of forethought and concentration. So you haven't figured out what you're supposed to do next. So obviously you can't continue writing, and that's distracting. I learned over that first year and a half, by the time I got to the third book, I was working on a bare bones outline system that worked really well for me. It allowed me to be super creative in between, but I sort of mapped out what I call touchstones. So they're things that have to happen in the chapter in order for the whole story to progress. But it's just those things, and I can play with the in between as much as I want to. So it's like a interesting combination of plotter and pantser. And
So, are
that,
you primarily a plotter then to make sure
yes,
that you
now.
don't, yeah. Oh, so you didn't do that at first.
No, the first two books were totally pantsed, and as best as I could keep them on track, I think they're probably my worst production, obviously. And that's why about a year and a half ago, I reached out to the artist that was working on my failed comic book and asked him to do illustrations while I went back through the old Tales of Halcyon stories and applied my new understanding to them so that I could put them out in one omnibus book known as the Tales of Halcyon Reforged, now with illustrations.
So, what made you decide to add those into it?
I love the story, and I grew up on the old big fantasy tomes that had drawings in them. So I thought, why don't I do that with this as an experiment, something new to learn how to do? Because everything that I've learned to do and have passed on to other authors so far are all things that I had to figure out. So now I've got this weird craving for challenges where I'm like, I'm going to do something totally different just so I can figure out how to do it.
You sound like me. I bet you like puzzles too.
I do, yes.
All all those problem solvers, it's like we got to have some sort of puzzle in front of us, it seems like.
Yeah, or at least something new to learn. There needs to
Right.
be some excitement in the mystery of life, or else it's just boring.
That's a lot of experience that you've had in a very short time.
Story of my life.
Story of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Everybody
how did,
that I do stuff with on a regular basis, like my podcast hosts and whatnot, they're always, because I remind them constantly, they always think, okay, I need to reach out to Daniel, but I don't expect him to respond immediately because they always know I'm busy doing something. Other than Whimsyland, which is technically two businesses, the editing and coaching, and then the sales and marketing of my novels, I
hmm
have up until recently, very recently, I had another business local to me that I also owned and operated. So I was essentially running three businesses at the same time.
you kind of sound like me. It's like I always got to be doing something. I just can't quite sit still. I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe it's because I grew up on a farm. It's like there's always something to do. You just kind of get used to that.
Yeah, well,
But
it's
you,
like kind of like Gen X mentality. Like there's
oh,
always
maybe
something
that's
to be
it.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's it. We didn't grow up with all the technology and kind of we've adapted, but at the same time, we're just kind of used to going, 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 doing our own thing.
And figuring it out as we go along. That's been the big part.
Exactly. And making some of those painful mistakes along the way. I'm sure you've had your share of them.
Oh, yeah. Hence the failed comic book.
Yeah, so tell me about that. What kind of a comic idea did you have and where did it fall off?
Well, it sort of dovetails with my Jisadai, the Angel War trilogy. I had so many readers come back to me in conversation and go, Jisadai was awesome. It felt like I was reading an anime, that I went, okay, well, I've always wanted to make comic books, and this is the era of independent creation. So why don't I give it a shot? So I farmed out and looked for an artist, and I adapted Jisadai into a comic book, starting with the first book. I was going to do 6 issues that covered the whole story of the first book, and then probably 6 issues per book after that, if it had succeeded. So I went back and took the first Jisadai book apart and put it into panel descriptions for my artist. And we worked on this really, really hard. And it cost me, all told, a little over $6,500, like $6,500 to produce that first comic book. But just the only thing I was worried about, and I'm never worried about paying myself for the things that I do. The only thing I was worried about was recouping the cost of the artist so that I could pay him immediately to keep working on the next issue. So my goal was about, we'll say about 5,000 in total. That first issue successfully made it, but it made it with a surprising amount of assistance from a well-known comic book creator named Eric July, who runs the Rippaverse. He had been told about the campaign, and there was some sort of thing where he had donated some money to another comic book creator who basically spit in his eye. So he said, fine, if you don't want it, I'll put it in Daniel's campaign. So I got what I needed for the second issue. I was like, okay, cool. So set up with my artist. We went through, put the second issue together, set it all up. I campaigned for that one to recoup payment for my artist, and just barely made enough to pay him for the third issue. And then the third issue, I didn't even hit $2,000. So it was a $2,000 loss out of my pocket to satisfy my artist, not to mention the production cost and the rest of it. And that's when I called it quits. I said, okay, I can't sustain this, unfortunately, as much as I want to, without
Yeah.
paying it out of pocket.
Well, that sounds like quite a lesson in how to coordinate things and how that can be very disappointing, especially if you can't continue on.
Yep. It was unfortunate, but we did get 3 issues out, and I turned those 3 issues into a 3 issue half volume manga just for fun, so I could learn how to do that. So now I know how to make comic books
Yeah.
from beginning to end. I know how to make a manga from beginning to end. And that's my treasure from the experience, not the loss of thousands of dollars, but the fact that now I know how to do these things. So if someone comes into the community and says, I've got this really cool idea and I really want to do it, I can help them navigate
Hmm.
their way through it.
Yeah. So you worked with one specific artist in particular. Did you actually look around at different artists? Did you have to kind of find one that would work with you?
Yes.
What kind of, and then what kind of price range do they usually want to do that kind of a project? I mean,
Um,
did you have a certain budget and you had to find someone in that budget? Okay.
yeah. I had an idea of my budget, sort of a ceiling of how much I wanted to spend on this, but I was looking for quality over the price. I'm like, if everybody that read the Jisedai stories saw it as an anime, I want to emulate manga style as much as possible to lean into what the fans approve of. So I looked for a quality manga artist and picked the one that was within my range that I really felt strongly about. I had fielded, I want to say, 350 artists,
So
and
where do you find the artists too?
unfortunately, most of them were people on social media. So I want to say,
Oh,
I'll be conservative and say about 300 of them were probably scammers, but they all
oh,
came at me.
oh, I'm sure. Yeah. If you say you've got money, there's always somebody who wants to take it.
Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of work. It took me 3 months just to settle on the artist that I chose. And then it took another 3 months just to figure out how to reconstruct the first sixth of the Jisai novel into I believe we did 28 pages.
That's okay. So the first six of the novel. How long is the full novel about?
The novel,
Obviously,
I want to
what was it?
say 75,000 words, I believe, somewhere around there.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say pages kind of is flexible depending on your how you format it, but authors in particular, we know the word count better than pages, perhaps.
Yeah. It works out to being 200-ish pages in
Okay.
novel form. I'm not a big fan of the Doorstopper book. There are only a few that I've actually enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So when I write stories, I try to keep my narrative tight to the plot, and it doesn't need to diverge too much into that realm where I end up with something that I can prop a desk up on. And instead, it's like a nice pocket read, because that's
Yeah.
my uncle used to give me boxes of sci-fi and fantasy novels when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and they were always the paperback pocket editions, the type of thing that you can jam into the back pocket of your jeans and go run and play.
Yeah.
And then when you're sitting down doing nothing and you're bored, you pull it out and you can read it. So that's what I was into. My favorite book series is The Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny. And all of those books were able to be held like this, but there
Is
were
that the mass market
15 of them.
paperbacks?
Yeah, but
Okay.
there
We
were
don't see those
15
anymore.
of them. So I was like thinking in that realm when I was writing
Uh-huh.
this stuff. Tales of Halcyon, because it's three novellas combined into one, is probably going to be the largest physical book that I've ever created.
And you said those are
It'll
between,
be about 180, 190,000 words. So
okay. So,
it's most likely going to be between 400 and 600 pages, depending on
yeah.
formatting.
But it's three units within that one,
Yeah.
basically. Three
Yep.
self-contained stories, I'm assuming.
Yeah. That all tell part of the same narrative.
A part of the same narrative. So, how did you format those to be a trilogy, but each one having a part? Is it different characters? Is it a segment of the story? And how did you organize
It's
that one?
it's timeline. So
Timeline?
the Wizard's Mistake is about the origin of the main character. City of Eld, it still follows the main character, but it sort of becomes a narrative explanation of this lost magical civilization and how the characters are affected by their finding of it. And then the hero's flaw is the conclusion of everything. So it takes all the parts from the previous two books and wraps it all up while maintaining its own individual story. The way I think about it is the concept behind it. The Wizard's Mistake was a wizard appears in a small village, picks a fat kid, and says, "You're destined to save the world." And the fat kid goes, "What are you talking about?" And the wizard drags him into the world, kicking and screaming because he doesn't want to go. And so the Wizard's Mistake is the early hero's journey. The
Okay.
refusal and then being brought
The
into it.
reluctant hero.
Yep. City of Eld, he's committed himself to being what he's been told he's supposed to be.
Okay.
And now he's doing it, learning to do it for all the right reasons. So it's kind of like child, teenager, man in
Okay.
individual books.
And that was your first writing, you said.
Yep. Those are my
So
first published works.
then what came after that?
G
What was the
Sedai came
next?
next.
Okay. And you're still working on that one because you have more planned, right?
I do. I have an overly ambitious goal for G Sedai. It depends. Like the Angel War is self-contained. If I never write another G Sedai book, it's over, and
So
I
there's
would
not
be
a bigger arc, or is there, but you're just doing it in episodes.
again. I think in timeline. So it's the
Okay.
the trilogy wraps up these particular events with these characters, and I don't
Okay.
necessarily have to come back to those characters if I don't want to in further books. But because I'm now sort of a businessman on top of an author, it's predicated on reader interest. Like I have so many stories that I can do. I have a 350 page document of ideas. I don't have to keep doing G Sedai, but if fans really love it enough that they want to hear more stories, I have 15 total arcs that could theoretically each be 3 books. So
With different characters then? Different sets of
different
characters?
characters, returning characters from
Okay.
previous books returning. There's a whole interspersed world in this outline that I've done that could last for potentially 45 books.
Wow.
I don't know that it's ever going to reach that.
Do you find you get interrupted with other ideas that you kind of go, okay, this can go set aside and I want to do this other idea now? Or is it just going to be predicated just on reader interest? Is
I
it
try
partly
to
your interest?
Yeah, I try to do a combination of both. Normally what happens if I feel strongly about a story, I'll write a short story about it first
Uh-huh.
and kind of see how I feel if I want to expand on it and it blossoms into a new book. And also I post them on social media and gauge people's reactions to them. So
Okay, so
it's a
where do you post
combination of
these
both.
then?
Mostly on X right now. I do have a Patreon that I probably should spend more time and attention with, but I'm still learning how to do that. So it's going to take some
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of services out there where you can get paid for putting content out there. It seems it's
Yep.
almost endless anymore, but finding the right one for you. I know Patreon's a really big one. I see a lot of people posting on Substack,
Hmm.
sharing those on X.
Yeah.
Um,
There's Royal Road for episodic
heard,
fiction. You know.
okay, heard of that one too.
Yep.
Yeah. So Patreon, do you put it up there and make people actually pay, or is it just kind of voluntary to pay you, or how do you
Um,
set that up?
for the time being, while I'm still figuring it out, I putting everything up for free. Once I
Okay.
understand how and I'm comfortable with doing it on a more consistent basis, I'll probably lock some stuff behind the paywall. But the majority of the short stories, my test projects, I think will always be free. If people
Okay.
want to subscribe to get like episodic work I get done or be part of my thinking process on different
Okay.
projects, then I'm happy to have them along for the journey. But my test stories are always going to be free, I think.
Okay. And do you have a link on Whimsyland there?
Yeah, I have it in my link tree. I've not
Okay.
put it on the website yet. I probably should get on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Yeah, I do have your link tree, so I'll make sure that's in the description too.
Yeah.
So then people can find you on Patreon to check out some of your works that you have for free.
Yep.
That sounds
On
great.
there, I have a cool short story that's the idea was the earth is starting to cool because the sun broke. So the heat
Oh,
isn't quite what it used to be. So most of the earth is covered in what we would consider winter. And I have a short story on there that was a test project for an idea about a solo outdoorsman wandering the ice waste and surviving. It kind of goes through what you would expect from one of those shows like Naked and Afraid or something, the survival docu series, but
okay.
written out with you following along with this very quiet, very stoic character who's on his way to a specific location, but he's got to survive to get there. I call
You see
him
a few of
Blue.
those. Blue?
Yeah,
Why?
because it fit the theme.
Oh, what's the theme on that? Just the loneliness?
Yeah,
Blue,
the
you usually
loneliness
think
of
depression.
isolation. Yeah, the
Okay.
loneliness of isolation, the
Yeah.
constant surrounding of ice and frost, and having to hope that you can find what you need to make it through the day
Oh,
and the
wow.
cold, cold night. It's not a depressing story, but it has that undertone of man versus nature, and nature is winning.
I did want to get into some other topics here because you told me you're Catholic, and so
I am.
I'm Catholic too.
Awesome.
The little indicator on my website, the St. Benedict medal,
Yes, I saw that.
just kind of a Nice little, if you know things, most people probably ignore it, but I'm kind of curious, how that influences your writing because, Jizadai being Angel Wars and these other stories that you have, does it play a part in it or is just kind of a background influence on you? You don't, because it sounds like you don't do any sort of like preaching like some Christian fiction does.
It's definitely not the focus, but it's a part of our world. So I kind of have a fundamental issue with avoiding faith and religion in anything that emulates the world that we live in. Like to just avoid it seems like you're not painting the full picture
Okay.
of what life would be like and how people might react to things. So it's almost like an assumption that nobody actually believes in God, so there's no justification for what some people do. And I don't ascribe to that. When I was writing G Sedai, I was not Catholic. I grew up a pastor's son. I grew up in a Presbyterian household. To be quite frank, my father was not a good person, but he got up every Sunday and told everybody how to live as a God-fearing person. And that screwed me up in my childhood into my teens, where I made the immature mistake of attributing to God what my father did.
Oh,
Because as a child, the only thing I could think was he's not nice, and why would God, a great nice being that I've been raised to believe in, let him speak God's word if he's not nice? And that carried into my teenage years. I stepped away from Christianity and tried to find meaning in alternative religions for many years. And some of that worked its way into my idea for G Sedai, because the story of G Sedai is it's a far future sort of mega Tokyo, like a lot of anime shows
right.
become. They've walled themselves off from the rest of the world after a great big war. And so it's a self sustained ecosystem that was taken over by corrupt capitalism. The corporations try to run everything. And then because the government was so gun shy about the former war, they outlawed lethal weapons like, firearms, and started enforcing the law with whatever non lethal technology they could come up with. But in response to that, the corporations leaned back on history and began what they refer to as a low war, which is a subterfuge war, where they created agents within each of their corporations that go and mess with the other corporations so that they can be the top crab in the bucket. So they create assassins, they create spies, and give them technologically advanced versions of historic Asian equipment. And then, of course, there's the one company, which is the main villain of my story for the first trilogy, the Angel War trilogy, who cultivated a whole group of these people and experimented on them to make the most capable agent for their uses. They did so with 8 individuals, and the leader of this program, who calls himself Genbu, which is a Asian folklore god, decided at one point that he was going to start calling them by code names after archangels. So they became known as the Suzakushin Corporation Holy Eight. There were 8 of them. They were highly skilled. They were better than most humans were, and they were spoken of in rumors as being an extremely deadly force. The last of the Suzakushin Holy Eight was created and given the name Gabriel. He was implanted with a experimental nanotechnology and essentially a small computer in his brain to control the nanobots that were in the rest of his body. They gave him the ability to access a little bit more physical capability than other humans could through these nanobots. Like they would repair wounds so he could heal faster. They could spike his amygdala and trigger the fight or flight response, which would make him faster, sharper, and stronger, kind of like that, what do they call it? Mother bear strength, where a
Oh yeah.
woman can lift a car off of their injured child if they're sufficiently panicked enough. The nanobots played on those regular human body systems to elevate him beyond normal human capacity. And in order to keep control of him, Genbu kept him on a very tight leash. So he lived in isolation and was just sent out to do jobs. And then he returned home and waited for his next set of orders. And he did that for, I believe I had him recruited at age 5. So he did that for 13 years and grew into this incredible super soldier who, during one of his missions, when the books begin, comes across a sex trafficked girl fleeing from her captors. And there's a circumstance I will explain afterwards where the sex trafficked girl is carrying a guinea pig with her. There's a story behind that I will explain in a few. And the way she treats the guinea pig triggers something in him that makes him decide to not return home, but to defend her from her pursuers. And he takes her home with him to make sure she's okay. And this pisses off the company and sets off this domino effect of him realizing that there's more to life than simply following orders. And he can be a person because now he has a friend, and that sets him in a rebellion against the Suzakshin Corporation and the rest of the Holy Eight, which is why it's called the Angel War arc.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting explanation. It's very similar. I can definitely see the anime influence having.
So Jisadai came from a random thought, and so did one of the main characters. I heard a song from a internationally famous musician called Kamui Gakt. He's from Japan. And when I heard the song, I just got, brain struck by an idea. And the only thing that I had of that idea was I was seeing in my head one person fighting, not so much aggressively, but determinedly, like they had a purpose that was well beyond them, that was guiding their hand, and they were fighting in opposition to do this. That slowly blossomed into the story of Jisadai by me going, okay, well, why would somebody fight this hard? Obviously, they would fight this hard for something that they care deeply about. What could they care deeply about? Would it be a romantic interest? Probably, but that's pretty passe. Everybody does that. Would it be something pure? And that's where the character of Hannah, the sex trafficked girl, appeared in my mind. Was you have this person who was taken from her family to pay a family debt, which is a unfortunately very Asian thing to happen, and forced into sexual slavery. And despite that, this awful thing that was happening to her, she never gave up hope that life could get better. And then this one incident where the two of them just happen to collide provides both my main character, Gabriel, something to fight for beyond himself and his company that could grow him into a human being. And it provides exactly what Hannah has always been yearning for ever since this happened to her, which was a way out into a better life.
You touched on some pretty deep topics there with the human trafficking in that one. Was that just kind of by chance, or was there something that touched you to include that?
It was a little bit by chance. I was looking for something really, truly evil that a person could endure, and it would be a miracle that they held their spirit through it. And that was probably the worst thing I could think of. So I built that whole thing, that her personality around who she is in the present when the book is supposed to start in my outline, and who she was in the past, which was a well-beloved daughter of a small family that was just making it by, but dad ran afoul of some folks and racked up some debts that he couldn't pay. And unfortunately, that is a potential thing that can happen to a family in those cultures. So it wove itself together for me once I had that premise built. But in the opening sequence of the story, and this is where I get into the guinea pig, initially I had planned on a cat sort of sneaking its way into the brothel and being the catalyst for what happens with her. But then, on a personal note, while I was storyboarding the G Sedai story, my daughter's guinea pig passed away,
Oh no.
and she was devastated. So I decided I would immortalize her pet by making a guinea pig with the pet's name. My daughter called it Heaven.
Oh.
We called it Heavy for short. So, because it was a little fat ball of fluff. Uh,
Yeah.
so I decided to immortalize her pet, and I changed the cat to a guinea pig and rewrote the Hannah section up to the inciting incident there with a guinea pig making its way through essentially a mouse hole into
Yeah.
her room, because they're not as fat as you think they are. Underneath all of that fur, they're actually pretty compact and squishy.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it seemed realistic for a guinea pig to work its way through a mouse hole.
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So the opening sequence with Hannah starts with the guinea pig making its way into her room, and she's just sitting there waiting for her next forced customer, and she's sort of expressionless, because what else could you be if that's the world you
Yeah.
live in? And this guinea pig pops out of the mouse hole and starts running around the room. So she's just staring at it like, I don't understand how this thing could get in here, but it's adorable. And the customer arrives, and the guinea pig tries to escape out the door. So it catches on his butt and it doesn't lock. And that's the moment where Hannah sees her opportunity and tries to make her escape. And she takes the guinea pig with her as she's fleeing through the floors of the brothel, makes it outside into the alleyway, and literally runs into Gabriel, who's just finished killing a couple of guys that he was told to do and was just on his way home. She begs him for help, and he initially denies her because he's programmed to just ignore everything. But then he sees, in her panic, she accidentally drops the guinea pig in a puddle, and immediately thinks of only it, not herself and the situation that she's in, and apologizes, picks it up, and starts trying to dry it off. And that's the thing that triggers childhood memory in Gabriel and makes him decide to defend her in that moment. So it's a random series of circumstances that just happen to coalesce into this journey for both these characters through these three books. But
And so,
go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, how does the relationship change then? You said it's not a romantic relationship, but more of a kind of he's protecting her.
Yeah, his whole goal throughout the whole story is to keep her safe, because once he realizes that his company wants her dead, because he doesn't fully understand it at first, but essentially she's a threat to their control over him. So once he realizes that they want her removed from the equation, then he starts deeply thinking about everything and realizes on a fully mature level that they want her out of the way so that they can continue to control him. And he realizes that maybe the world that he grew up in isn't correct, and there's something else out there. There's other circumstances that play through in the first book, which includes a character that I did not design appearing out of nowhere. And he ends up providing both the moral compass for Gabriel, but he also actually happens to be one of the catalysts for my return to Christianity. So as I was writing this, I planned on Gabriel and Hannah escaping out of the city into the wastelands that were war torn in the surrounding prefectures. And I wanted to have them hide. I had a random idea to have them hide in an old broken down cathedral for a night. And that suddenly came with a character, an old man that just sprang to life, Athena like, fully formed out of my brain, named Sato Hasegawa. I don't know where he came from. I attribute it to divine inspiration, because
Yeah.
he is my favorite character in the story. His whole family tried to survive the war and stay in their family home next to this church. And his whole family, generations of them, have been the caretakers of the church ever since it was constructed. So they have a legacy of caring for this place. He's the last surviving member of his line. All of his sisters passed away of various things over the course of them trying to survive in this broken down, completely disregarded area. And now he's alone, and he's been alone for years, when suddenly these two young people appear in his church. And he's a God-fearing Christian, and he helps them and ends up providing a moral compass for Gabriel that I wasn't prepared for, and a better reason for Gabriel to continue doing what he was doing. It was a beautiful thing that happened. And a lot of the readers are like, Mr. Hasegawa is one of the great characters. And I'm like, I know, but I can't take credit for him. But
Yeah.
by the time I finished all three books and like played out the whole arc of things, there's a scene in the third book where Gabriel ends up surrounded by the police force when they go back into the city to confront the corporations. Actually, it might be the second book. I might be misremembering. Yeah, it's the second book. There's a scene in the second book where that happens, and everybody's worried about him, obviously, because he is one man and there's a ton of them. Even though he's a superpowered man, they are still worried. And Hasegawa, one of the aspects of him that I had not touched on that just came with his arrival was that he participated in the war. He was conscripted to be a soldier. So he has military training. That part is sort of slightly alluded to in the first book, because there's a confrontation between him and a sniper that shows that he has skills beyond just being a regular old person surviving in the outside world. But in the second book, I was inspired to come up with this scene where Hasegawa has to actually try to harm people. He doesn't want to kill them, but he's forced into a position where he has to actually hurt people for what he feels is the best cause, which is protecting this young man that he's come to love and support and is doing something good. So he takes up his rifle and he says the prayer of St. Michael while popping shots at cops.
Oh, wow.
He's intentionally trying not to kill them. So he's trying to employ as much of his rifleman skill as he can to only wound them, like intentionally aiming for the vest, that sort of thing. But the prayer is supposed to represent that I don't want to do this, but I see no other choice. St. Michael, protect me.
Had you already started looking into the Catholic faith at that point? Or
Yes.
well,
Yes.
so how did this character inspire you towards that conversion?
Well, I was doing research because when he came into my mind, he was a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing research into Catholicism the whole time before I even started writing book two. But even though he's not a real human being, because I, sort of made him up on pages, I was inspired by what he was going through and how he reacted to all of these things, that I felt so deeply about this character that I started thinking, okay, maybe that's where I should be looking for my understanding of what's beyond the mortal world. So, and my mother suggested I check out a bunch of different churches and different denominations, and like I've done that already. And she said, well, go
Yeah.
check out a couple of parishes then if you're interested in Catholicism, because they had converted some years before.
Oh,
And
okay.
my mother and my stepfather, they had converted a few years before. So she says, why don't you come to our parish? And I went to their parish and didn't do anything for me. I was actually kind of turned off by that particular community for reasons that I won't explain. And she said, well, there's another one. It's a little further away. Why don't you go check them out? And I said, okay. So I went to one mass, and surprisingly, I learned after the fact, but surprisingly, that one mass that I went to was one of the rare times where one of the older priests of that parish actually performed the mass. A wonderful old man known as Father Canavan. And I really like him. I love when he gets an opportunity to do it. It's very rare. But that one time I went first, I felt a whole new sensation that I'd never felt before in any of my explorations of religion. I was sitting there listening to his homily and thought to myself, okay, I really like what he's saying. I really enjoy this mass that they've performed so far. But the doubting Thomas in me was like, I don't know if this is right. I kind of need something more. And I swear I felt somebody put their hands on my shoulders. And that was the moment I knew that was where I needed to be. So a week and a half later, I registered for to be a catechumen, to be a convert.
Wow. No, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
He has worked in a great many mysterious and wonderful ways since then.
Oh, I'm
That
sure.
is true.
So is that where you came up with the idea to do the children's illustrated books?
Yes. So since my mother had converted years previously and I was on my way to being a convert, we were talking about creative ideas. And I said, well, I have this artist who did my comic book and I really want to keep paying him because he's such a great guy. And I actually like him a lot. Like we're friends as well, even though he lives very, very far away from me. I do everything I can to try and help him keep creating art by
Yeah.
finding new ways to employ him. So I said, well, I have this artist. Let me see if he can do something that's kids oriented. And if he can do something that's kids oriented, we can hire him as the illustrator and we can do a kids version. Do you remember? I can't remember the name of them now. What were they? Something with a V. Virtue books, I think it was. Like the virtue of self-confidence, the virtue of
No,
wisdom.
I didn't hear
Oh,
about those. I'd be interested in knowing more.
I grew up on those. They were a series of kids books. I want to say that came out in like the 60s, maybe. And what they are moral character stories told from the perspective of historical figures. So they
Okay.
did like Madame Curie, they did the astronauts going to the moon, they did famous scientists, famous historians, and it was all tied to a specific character virtue, basically.
Okay.
So we were talking and we were batting back and forth, and I said, "You remember those books, The Virtue of Doing This?" And she's like, "Yeah, I got those for you when you were a kid." And I'm like, "I know, because I love them and I still think about them." And I said, "What if we do something like that, but it's through Catholicism?"
Okay.
And she said, "Well, I've loved researching all the saints, and there's a ton of them, so I'm sure
Right.
we could come up with a thematic story to tell through the stories of these saints." So we started storyboarding, and she said, "I really want to do Mary," and I said, "Well, you can't do Mary without Joseph, obviously."
Yeah.
So we thought, why don't we give this a try, and we'll create the flagship of the series, the stories of Saint Mary and Saint Joseph. And then I came up with the joke from the song, "When the Saints Go Marching In." I was like, what if we call it Saints Go Marching? And I see if Kevin can do these really cute images of like a line of saints marching across the cover. And then I thought, okay, well, if we're going to do specific saints, then whoever we're talking about should be front and center. So maybe they've stepped out of the march and they're right in the middle of the cover and the rest of the saints are behind them. And that's where we came up with the cover for the Saints Go Marching book. Kevin, my artist, did all of the illustrations, and all I said to him was, "Can you do something cute for kids?" And he shot back with this chibi style art of characters, and I went, "Okay, make these people in that style for me so I can show it to my mom and get her opinion on it." So he did that, and I showed it to her, and she goes, "Oh, that's really cute." And then I said, "Okay, what if we tell the story in text format on the bottom half of a landscape page and have a comic strip of these chibi characters running across the top so that children can look at the comic strips of these cute characters instead of it just being an illustration book, but they can like follow along with the story from panel to panel across the page while the parents can read the text part underneath.
That's
And
a very unique
so,
idea.
yeah, so Saints
And
Go
I can,
Marching was born.
so did that come before or after doing the Jizadai as manga
Oh,
style?
that came way after the comic book failed.
Okay.
There was I want to say an 8 month lull where I kept apologizing for not being able to pay Kevin to make more pictures. And then I suddenly had this idea and I'm like, Kev, I got work for you. And he goes, awesome.
Okay. I wasn't sure if maybe you hadn't said anything, but I wasn't sure if maybe you had done another project with him and I was
I
out of order or something.
No, that it came way after. I tried to like he does concept art for me if I can throw him some cash. So
Yeah.
he did some concept art for my modern horror series. And then very recently, after we finished Saints Go Marching and I had built up some more disposable income, I hired him to do the illustrations for Tales of Halcyon as well.
It's nice when you get to know an artist and you can kind of keep them. I know because it's really difficult to find that right artist for a project, and it's like by the time you start working with one, you don't want to have to go looking for somebody new.
Yeah,
I
and we
know,
had built
just
up such a rapport that
yeah,
I would give him descriptions and things that I wanted him to do, and he'd shoot back with better versions of it instead of just going, "Hey, can I do this?" He would just do it because he
wow,
knew instinctively from us working together for so long that if he had to tweak the perception or he had to tweak the details and he gave it back to me, I would either go, "This is awesome," or "Hey, can you change this little piece?" And he'd be like, "Okay,
yeah,
cool."
yeah. I just know from working with cover artists that you go back and forth a little while, and then once you get used to their style and they kind of get used to your type of ideas, the two of you start to mesh. I
Yep,
can see
I have the
that
same
that must
thing
have happened.
with my modern horrors cover artist. Totally different artist because I wanted a different style. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
after doing two books together, when I asked him to produce the third book, I gave him descriptions of the characters I wanted, how I wanted them positioned, and then I was like, make the font similar, but just tweak it so that it's representative of the theme I'm going for here. And he's like, I got you. And I just left it at
Sounds like
that.
sounds like those 350 some artists you went through, you got just the right one for you.
Yep.
So that's great. So what about this monsters?
Oh,
Tell me a little bit more about that one.
modern horrors, what came from my daughter. We because I raised her alone for the majority of her life because I took care of her from she was 2 years old up until she moved out
Oh,
recently,
wow.
and it was just me and her. She kind of, I guess we would say she was pre-programmed with the Gen X mindset and old television. So we were
Yeah.
watching The Addams Family one night,
Oh, wow.
the original series that all the fun stuff that
The
everybody
old
loves
black and
now is
white.
based on. Yep, the original stuff. We
Wow.
were watching that one night, and after she had watched a couple of horror movies, so she was in a spooky mood, and she was watching the Addams Family. I made dinner, and we sat down, and she looks at me and she goes, "Would you write like a new version of Monsters?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, like Dracula or the werewolf or Frankenstein, but like in modern times." 1,000 ideas just flooded
Oh,
my
I'm sure.
brain in that moment. So I started outlining and I came up with, you remember Monster Squad?
No.
Oh,
Sorry.
it's an 80s movie where a bunch of precocious kids a la the Goonies end up being in the way of all the movie monsters that everybody knows trying to take things over. And it's a really funny movie, very highly enjoyable, plays all the classic tropes. I came up with a storyboard where each of these books is focused on a different monster in the modern world. So it applies modern culture, technology, and everything. And instead of doing just purely scary stuff, even though it is obviously horror stories, I wanted to play on it a little bit. So my design for the entire series is that each of these monster stories, they all interconnect enough that by the end of the series, the final book is all of them coming together to do something amazing. So it's the monsters enduring what they are and then finding something better for themselves at the end. Because I love wrapping things up in a positive, hopeful bow as best as I can. So the stories are the vampire, the werewolf, Frankenstein as monster, creature from the Black Lagoon, a combination of witchy slash the mummy, and then the sixth book is the Everything Comes Together book. I named it Modern Horrors. It started with the vampire, which is Heir of the Dragon, and it's sort of a new version of the Dracula tale, but this particular one wraps around there's a theory that one of the brides of Dracula survived Van Helsing. And so I thought, okay, if she did that, maybe after a couple of centuries, she goes a little crazy and history repeats itself. So she decides she's going to create grooms for herself, and she manipulates the lives of these three boys all the way up until they grow into men. So they go to college together, and it's all behind the scenes manipulated by her. They grow up as best friends, they go to college together, and then she insinuates herself into their lives and sets them up for turning them. But something goes wrong with one of them, who is the main protagonist of the story. His name is David. And again, because I was writing this and exploring my newfound Catholicism, David was Catholic.
Yeah. That's a very biblical name right there.
Yes. So David is Catholic. He's preyed upon by this vampiress. His two best friends are preyed upon by her, but she has a whole plan for all three of them, and something goes wrong with David's turning. She thinks that it didn't work and he's dying, so she tosses him out and laments the screw up of her entire plan. But what she didn't realize was he has a direct line to Vlad Drekul's father, a direct blood relation. And what that does is it makes David not only a vampire, but a vampire of the bloodline of Dracula. So he isn't enthralled to his sire, and he has developed the same vampiric abilities that Dracula has developed. And he decides, okay, this woman screwed up our lives and turned us into monsters. She's got to pay. So that's what Heir of the Dragon is about. It's sort of a revenge story with a psychotic vampire cougar, to put it simply.
So are these really like dark horror stories, or are they more like a fantasy type story that doesn't have so much of the horror elements, just the monster elements?
Both, because being what they are, the horror is in each of them existing and dealing with the things that have gone on so far. For example, with David, he has to deal with waking up dead and being consumed with the bloodthirst and being an affront to the thing that he loves most, which is God. So it's very psychological horror for him. For Mira in the second book, A Beast Unlike Any Other, she is a werewolf. So it's a combination of body horror and psychological for her, as she goes through the physical transformation of becoming a werewolf, and she's a girl, and it's terrifying and extremely painful, both physically and mentally, to watch your body transform into something unbidden. So there is horror in it, but it does thematically have a modern sort of fantasy fiction.
More of an urban fantasy type?
Yeah, because it's all modern day. Heir of the Dragon happens in the early 2000s, and then A Beast Unlike Any Other is 20 years later. So when
Big yes.
David appears in a beast unlike any other, he's been a vampire for 20 years now. And now I'm working on the third book, which has turned out to be a little more whimsical than the others, but with good reason, because it's the Frankenstein story. There's a certain whimsy to it, but then the horror element will be when everything goes horribly wrong, as it inevitably does with this sort of thing. And that's when people realize that there is something unnatural living among them, because that's what the Frankenstein story ultimately was.
How do you bring Frankenstein into the modern age?
Well, the title, unfortunately, will probably piss some people off. The title of the book is How to Build a Better Girlfriend.
I actually think that's kind of cute.
Yes.
For a title.
So here's the breakdown. Max, the equivalent of Dr. Frankenstein, is a young genius, and he is incredibly antisocial, borderline incel. And because he can't make social connections with people, he creates a chat GPT style AI companion for himself. And he calls her Gal after his Gal Friday. He becomes so enamored with his friendship with this AI, this linguistic model, that he thinks, okay, well, she's perfect, so I'll just make her a body. And then she can be my friend and possibly even my lover. So he creates, like, goes through the entire rigorous process of creating a fully synthetic android body, and with the plan to upload his chat GPT years long programmed personality into this body so that he can have the perfect woman.
A little bit of weird science going on here.
Yes, a little bit of weird science involved. It goes wrong, as these things inevitably do.
Right.
And what ends up happening is the body is implanted with the first part of the upload, which is a framework that he built for its ability to articulate itself within the body, the general personality stuff, and some basic programming that sort of force it to view him positively.
Okay.
For obvious reasons. But the latter half of the upload fails, and what ends up happening is it created a version of Gal that doesn't have all of the pre-programmed knowledge that he wanted her to have. It's sort of a blank slate. So it has a fundamental understanding of how to speak, how to move, how to smile, all these other things, but it doesn't. And unfortunately, it was pre-programmed to love him, but it doesn't have all the minor details inside of it. And once it's awake, he actually finds he kind of likes it that way, because then they get to know each other instead of him just knowing instinctively because he programmed all of the stuff into her. So he's viewing her as a mystery and sort of like a real person as time goes on. And that's the building of their relationship as companions until certain circumstances reveal that she's not human to the people in the town that they live in. And then the townsfolk get all up in arms, and it goes down the Frankenstein tale from there.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of things you see nowadays with robots and AI.
Yep.
And
unfortunately, sex dolls and
yeah. There's been talk about that too with AI and robots and stuff.
Yep, that's where
So
I
you're
took
kind of,
inspiration for all of this.
I was gonna say you're right in there. You're right on the ball right now. Just perfect timing for it.
Yep.
And then
All
what's the
because
next
my
one?
daughter asked me a question.
Yeah. So does she write too then, or is she just inspired dad?
No, she's an artist, so sometimes she
Okay.
draws concept art for me, but most of the time we just talk. And occasionally I'll get inspired by something that she posits, and she'll be inspired by something I posit. I don't know if I can manipulate my camera without screwing it up, but she's there. Some of her little paintings on the wall there. When she was 3 years old, we got her a princess castle for Christmas, and at some point during the summer after that Christmas, she's been obsessed with that castle for the whole period of the year up to that point. We were sitting on the front porch and all the adults are talking. And of course, my daughter's bored. So I'm like, why don't you draw something? I gave her a piece of paper and some crayons. And so she's laying on the porch floor drawing on this piece of paper. And when she's done, she says, look, and she holds it up. And I look at it, and it is like she's 3, but it was her attempt at doing a 3D model of her princess castle.
Wow.
Not just a flat one like you would expect of a 3-year-old.
Uh-huh.
It had her efforts at
Dimension.
making dimension.
Wow.
And that's when I knew that art would be a thing for her. So I always encouraged her to continue to pursue that creatively.
I always told my kids, though, the art's on the side because that's not that's not a definite income. Do that on the side. If that takes off, great. But art is so subjective, you can't live on that unless you establish yourself really well. But she
Yeah.
doesn't like other people to see it. So it's like, okay, how about computer science? So that's what my
Yeah, you do
oldest
the
one's
best you
into.
can. And I
Yeah.
had the same thing. Like I said, I've been a storyteller my whole life, but everybody told me that I could never live on being an author, which is true.
Hmm. Right.
So I became a teacher instead, which is another form of storytelling, essentially.
So what did you teach?
Elementary initially.
Okay.
I taught 3 years of kindergarten and 4 years of first grade, 1 year of second grade, and I didn't like it. So I went back to kindergarten, and then the BS with COVID started, and I was like, I need to get out of this. And I had a pretty decent nest egg, so I'm like, I'm just going to consolidate all of my money and spend a year writing some books. And that's where all of this began.
And now how does Whimsyland do? Does that pay all the bills now?
It satisfies the bills, yes. I
Okay.
can live off of my Whimsyland income. In the 4.5 years I've been doing this, as of now, because it's the end of April, I've worked successfully with 130 people. I average about 4 clients a month in
Okay.
some capacity, whether it's coaching or just doing editing work on things that they've created. And that's 130 individuals, not people who come back for me to do their second or third book. I have a pretty
Okay.
consistent repeat customer base, but I'm constantly getting new clients, which is really nice. So I'm thinking maybe now that I've finished with the physical business, it might be time to take on some more clients and commit my new free time to that.
Your new free time?
Yes. Well, I was running a third business here,
Oh, that's
so
right.
it was like separating my head. Part of me was always thinking about the physical business. The other part of me was thinking about Whimsyland. And now that things have completed with the physical business and we're no longer going to be doing that for the foreseeable future, I can 100% focus on Whimsyland.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now I can picture what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's made for very busy days. This
I'm
last
sure.
week since we shut things down with the physical location has been a breath of fresh air, let me tell you.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot of pans in the fire or
A
irons in
lot
the
of
fire. That's
irons,
what I'm trying to
yes.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, with trying to produce at least 2 books a year, running this physical business that was open for 12 hours a day, and like making sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to do, and then
Hmm.
redevoting my attention to coaching clients, which coaching clients is very different because you have to come up with a teaching strategy for the individual. So every person is different. I can't just fall on a model. They
Yeah.
come to me with a specific issue, and I have to create a way for them to grasp that issue and then practice that issue until it is no longer an issue. It's a very different animal from getting a draft of a book, reading through it a couple of times, making notes, correcting grammar and punctuation and all of that stuff, and then communicating the issues that I found and helping them figure out ways to get through them. it's all teaching, but they're all different animals. So my mind is going in every which direction at all times.
But it sounds like your experience as a teacher really comes together with this Whimsyland.
Yes. I'm just taking a skill that I had and applying it to something that I wanted to do, which was help people tell stories.
And it's great that Whimsyland is picking up for you. And I was kind of curious too. Do you do more coaching or do you do more editing? Do you find
Uh,
that people come to you first? What do they want?
I would say it's about 75% editing, 25% coaching.
What kind of stuff do you help them with in the coaching then?
It depends on the issue. I've created teaching modules for someone who wanted to learn how to outline so that they never got stuck. I've created learning modules to practice how to naturally communicate dialogue and tell stories through dialogue. It really depends on what they need. I take every person and what they want to work on individually. So it's not like a how-to book.
Right.
It's more nuanced towards what is it that you're struggling with and how can I help? We'll take 1 month of meeting once a week. I'll give you homework after each session. And then by the end of the month, if you're comfortable enough with what you've learned to go out and do it yourself without any more help, we're done. Success.
Yeah.
Congratulations. If not, we can continue to schedule appointments until you are.
So during those coaching sessions, then are some of the assignments that you mentioned, are they actual writing projects that they have to have you evaluate to see if they're making progress?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually tuned to whatever it is that they're working on so that they get the double reward of making progress on their project.
Do they oftentimes have a project that they're working on already when they come to you, or is it just they're coming to you because they just want to have general improvement in their skills?
So far, it's been specific projects. Like
Okay.
everyone has already been working and they've just run themselves into a wall and they can't find their way around the wall. I haven't had anybody so far, but it would be really fun to explore that. I haven't had anybody so far say, I haven't written anything, I haven't started yet, I don't know what to do, teach me.
Oh, from the ground up.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's never happened.
A lot of times I think by the time people are getting serious where they probably need coaching, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that they've already started something. Like you said, they
Mm-hmm.
get stuck versus somebody who just goes, I want to start something, but I don't know how. I
Yeah.
think most people kind of just jump in. Is that what
Yep.
you're saying? Okay.
Yeah. They'll get like a part of the way through a rough draft on something and go, okay, I've written myself into a wall. I don't know what to do now. I need help.
So what's the biggest wall that you find people need help on?
Usually it's story beats.
You want
More
to kind of
often than not.
explain for
Well, if you
people?
imagine if you imagine story beats are the events that are occurring from the beginning of the story to the end. Each beat has a purpose that fulfills the entire narrative by the time you get to the end. Normally, what happens, especially with indie writers who aren't practiced at this sort of thing, is that either they're not outlining, so they don't know what comes next, and they're just sort of winging it, or they, I guess for lack of a better word, they front load everything. So the whole story gets explained in the first couple of chapters and then they don't know where to go. And it's not a full book, it's just like a half story. And then it's a matter of taking what they've already written and going, okay, we need to cut this off here. You need to expand here. And I'll show you how to do that. And that'll fill in this section so that the reader can be more engaged by what's going on. And as you continue to do that with me from chapter to chapter, eventually the story actually stretches into its proper form.
So your clients then that you've helped have they gone on to, or maybe I should rephrase that. What kind of success have they had afterwards?
Being an indie author is extremely difficult. I say every sale is a win
Yeah.
because the average indie book only ever sells about 250 copies in its lifetime.
And you've looked up that statistic?
Yes.
I take it. Okay.
Yep.
And then for editing, what do you find is the biggest issue that writers have that stands out the most? Maybe I should say.
kind of a loaded question. Would you like me to start with developmental or line and copy?
Well, you could take it in the different editing stages too.
Yeah.
What do you see most at each stage?
Okay. Developmental is supposed to be the first type of editing that anyone has done on their project. That's always step one because you don't want to clean up something that's not ready. So a lot of authors skip the developmental phase because they're just self-assured that their story is right. It's not.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, if my job didn't need to exist, that would be awesome. But my job exists because it's necessary. And the more people that stop buying into the idea that their idea is perfect the way it is, the better storytelling will be as a whole. And I
Agreed.
think, people, consumers even, they can tell. They
Hmm.
fundamentally know how a story is supposed to sound. And if it's not there, they know it, and it takes away from the experience. So we've got a glut of AI books that are awful.
Oh, yeah.
And then we've got a glut of people's ideas that aren't getting secondary feedback from a professional to show them, hey, that thing that you really love that you put in there, I'm sorry, that's working against you when you're trying to tell the story. You should be putting your attention over here on this part because that's for the readers. And the most common issue that authors have, even traditional published authors, because I have a few clients who do that, is the assumption that the reader is in the author's head when it comes to developmental editing. What I mean by that is they don't explain it because they just assume that everybody's inferring like they are. So the reader absorbs these words without the same context that the writer had when the writer was designing the scene. I
Hmm.
have to say to them, I don't know what this means. And if
Yep.
I don't know what this means, your readers are not going to know what this means. You need to explain it to us. With line and copy, it's just a matter of bad grammar and poor conjunctions and the ever dreaded emotive speaking. Even I
Emotive
do
speaking.
that. Yes, emotive speaking. He sighed dejectedly. Well, if you're
Oh, yeah.
sighing, you're dejected. You don't have to tell them it's dejected.
Yeah, right.
But even I do that in my rough drafts. So it's
Hmm.
normal. Everybody does it. It's okay. But that's what an editor is for.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's the author getting their thoughts down one way or another. But at some point you have to go back and rewrite that because okay, that's just your notes to yourself, more or
Yep.
less. That kind of stuff.
Yes. Rough drafting is getting the story out on paper. Editing is refining that into something that you can tell to other people.
Right.
And if you haven't
As,
done the editing part, you can't tell the story to other people yet.
do you see any issues with like sentence structure in general and how they're put together, the thoughts are put together in paragraphs? Is that a big issue for a lot of writers?
Yeah,
Or is
and
it
that
more
that
new writers?
it's more common in new writers than it is in older ones, but depending on what draft they give me, like if it's a raw rough draft I've gotten from traditionally published authors, they make all the same mistakes always
Oh,
because
okay.
it's just the fundamental way of doing it. When you're processing something, your initial way of getting it out in your head, it takes a certain skill to be able to do that effectively. That's
Hmm.
why they teach people how to public speak, because it's a skill.
Yep.
And public speaking is essentially storytelling and vice versa. So if you've taken a course in public speaking, you know how to very quickly translate your thoughts in something easily understood by the audience. Most people don't have that. So what comes out of them is full of pauses and disjointed ideas, and like you start talking about one thing and then tangent off into another thing and come all the way back around and back to that thing again.
You just described me most of the time.
I described everyone most of the time. That's the point that I'm making. We all
Well, you're
do
making
that.
me feel better about myself the way
Yeah,
I am
we
sometimes.
all react that way when we're trying to convey ideas to each other. The public speaking refines that into a process where it tells you to not go on the tangent and just focus on the topic. And that's what an editor has to do for every rough draft, is take all the tangents and side details and work them with the author into a direct narrative that addresses those things, makes sure everyone is on the same page, and they get from step 1 to step 2, step 2 to step 3, all the way to whatever the end is.
So do you have any clients where you've started with them with a rough draft and gone through every stage of editing, then all the way to the end?
Yes, and repeatedly.
Okay. Or do any of them tend to just use you for one stage of the editing?
Actually, a lot of them do, and I try to advise against it. Some of it is a financial cost, which I totally understand.
Yeah,
So I can't say, spend more of money you don't have on me.
right.
And, so I'll do the best I can with what they pay me to do. Sometimes a little bit above and beyond. But I've just recently finished with a client who brought me her third draft, and we took apart, I want to say, at least a quarter of it and redesigned that because of the way that it was narratively written in that third draft. It just wasn't there. So we together, over the course of many sessions, we're just going for an hour at a time, line by line, idea by idea, detail by detail. And then when we were done that, she said, okay, this worked really, really well. We're going to go through the rest of the book and make sure it's all on that same level. I said, good. That's the thing to do. So we went all the way back to the beginning, made sure it all flowed together with the new stuff that we added, make sure the new stuff that we added flowed all the way to the end, finished it up. It took two more runs of drafting
Wow.
before we were completed with that. And then she was ready to publish. I walked her through the publishing part because that's part of the coaching. Is
Okay.
there's the ins and outs of like the systems. If you use Amazon, if you use Drafted
Yep.
Digital, if you use Barnes and Noble, if you use Ingram Sparks, they're all different. It's the
Yep.
same framework, but the details are all different. So I sit there with every client when they're ready to publish that wants me to do this, and I walk them through it to make sure that every detail is ready to go and it's done. And right before we went to hit publish, she goes, I'm afraid nobody's going to buy this. And I said, honestly, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised when it releases. So just, try to relax and enjoy the anxiety a little bit. I know it's hard, but try to enjoy the anxiety and let it rip. And when she did, her launch was more than she actually dreamed of. Wasn't by far like a bestseller type thing, but her first day, I believe she made about 20 sales just in that first day of launch,
Wow.
which is incredible for a
Yeah.
launch day for an indie published book, that for a first time author. And she was just telling people that it finally was out. She'd been talking about it and building up as much buzz as she could with her small media presence, but just getting 20 people to buy it immediately. And then over the subsequent weeks, she's reached out to me and she said, people keep telling me after they finish reading it that they really loved it. And she feels so much better about it. And I said, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised,
Uh-huh.
because I saw, as a consumer and as her editor, the things that people would love about this book. So I knew what they were going to see.
Is there any particular genres that you do or don't do, or you cover everything that people need?
I have learned over these 4.5 years to do every genre, including some nonfiction genres. I've
Okay.
done every fiction genre. I like to do fantasy and sci-fi. I love mysteries as a reader, so I'm happy to work on mysteries and those I enjoy. But being part of the process and knowing the who done it at the end is not as much fun as discovering it yourself while reading it through. And I've done romance. Not a huge fan of modern romance, especially the romantasy genre. I'm sorry, this might get me crucified, but I
I don't want to get you into any
romanticy
trouble.
upsets me on a fundamental storytelling level because it's so basic. There's no magic behind it. It's always the same thing. Awkward girl, weird monster falls in love with awkward girl becomes less awkward, weird
Uh,
things happen, and
so
then it's
there's certain tropes to romanticy then.
yeah,
Okay.
that are unfortunately constantly regurgitated.
Okay. So, well, it's got a big audience, but again, it's romance, so that tends to be very formulaic and
Well, who doesn't
what the
want to be
readers prefer.
romanced? That's why the genre is so big. Who doesn't
Yeah.
want the excitement of falling in love? I mean, it's a universal. And in this day and age, there are certain aspects of life that I think everybody has experienced, and those are the tropes that they use.
Yeah. And there's always that butterflies in the stomach.
Exactly. Like I watch romance films,
Yeah. I like
what they
that.
call chick flicks. I watch them, and some of them I'm like, oh, I'm really
Yeah.
happy for them at the end. Other ones I'm like, okay, this was just one cookie cutter trope to the next. I'm glad it's over. So it's
Yeah.
really kind of depends on how well the story is told at the end of it.
But since you've done it now, editing the romantasy, you know the tropes, and I would think with that experience, you know how to better guide your clients to a story that's going to be somewhat different at least, but still fall in those tropes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
there are things you have to lean into when you're writing,
Yeah.
and tropes are universals. That's why like the arguments on social media about whether or not Tolkien was actually good or having dragons in your book, fantasy book is passe are stupid arguments because they're fundamental parts of the genre. You use them or
Hmm.
you don't, but if you don't use them, people notice because they're fundamental. And if you do use them, people notice, and that's okay. So there's really no negative answer to this.
Talking about tropes, you kind of made me think, what is the most unique story you found? I mean, did you have to try to get it into more of the tropes, or do you really just guide that writer based on their vision when it's like something so different?
That's a good question.
Have you ever had
I
anything like that?
Yes, and my co-script writer's book. That was how we met.
Oh,
He reached out for editing services, and the book that he gave me, it was rough. It needed a lot of work, but the premise, the characters, there was so much. It succeeded in being a fantasy epic in all the right ways with characters that weren't what you expect of a fantasy epic.
okay.
So I thought that was wholly unique. And he did a really good job in communicating that stuff. He just had some basic issues that needed to be addressed in the narrative. And we finished with that. His name's Jared Chrisman. I
Okay.
didn't realize it at the time. Like his name rang a bell to me, and it took me, I think, like a week or two before I went, "Oh, that's where I know him from." Holy cow! Because he
What?
was in a heavy metal band called Corpus Christi that I used to listen to when I was a teenager.
Okay.
So I recognized his name, but it clicked like a week or so into me editing his book. So I
Yeah,
had a
but that was
moment of
how many
being,
years in between though?
yeah. So I was, yeah, well, I worked with him 2.5 years ago. So yeah, I was in my 40s by then, but still, I was a little starstruck by it when it hit. I was like, oh my
I'll
God,
bet you were.
I'm editing a guy I used to listen to on MTV.
Oh, wow.
That's wild.
That is
Um,
wild, isn't that? It's strange how the world works sometimes.
yeah, and he was while I was editing the book, he was filming his first film, a western called Missouri Breaks: The Ballad of Missouri Bill. It's available on Amazon if ever anybody wants to check it out. It was
I
really
think I've
good.
heard of that.
Yeah, it's an indie produced. He did it on a shoestring budget, but it really feels like
Where
it
was
had
that filmed at?
around his town. he did a ton of editing work to make it historically accurate, to make sure there was nothing modern in the backgrounds and stuff like that. And he had to spend on costuming and props, and so there was a lot of money that got put into it. But as far as film production is concerned, it was extremely shoestring, and the
Yeah.
quality of it, the storytelling, the dialogue, it blew me out of the water. And that's the second time I was able to experience his unique idea of storytelling. And then we did I was doing Iron Age Knights podcast at the time, so we had him on to talk about the film when it came out, and then we did a server-wide watch party of the Ballad of Missouri Bill, and a bunch of people came, watched it with us. And then after everybody left, I was just loitering to talk with Jared, and he goes, "So I want to get started on my next project. You want to co-write it with me?"
Is that how you got into, you mentioned script writing?
Yep. So and I'm always looking for a new challenge. So I'm like, heck yeah, I'm in. Let's do this. So we co-wrote a suspense thriller, and that's the
Oh,
film that we're working on now.
okay. So, and you're going to start filming that when?
The lion's share of filming will be done in the beginning of December this year. I'm heading out to his state in the beginning of December, and we're going to take a couple of weeks to get as much of the scene work done as possible, because he wants me to co-direct now as well, so he can focus on doing some of the other stuff that he needs to do, and I can keep an eye on the overall production. Once we finish that part, it'll probably take a couple of months to wrap up any other extraneous scenes that need to be done, and a couple of months to do post. So our plan, I believe, is for the film to launch late 2027.
Okay. So does it, since you're going to be starting it, the filming later in the year, does it take place in winter then, or does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted snow to be on the ground, so we decided
And I take it
early
his state gets
December
a
would
lot of
be.
snow.
Yes, the whole story involves the main character Marcus is a former NCIS agent who retired under dubious circumstances. Basically, he was given the option to retire or be drummed out, and he chose retire. He comes home, takes a job as a detective for his small hometown in the mountains, and shortly after he's getting himself acclimated, he hasn't had the time to really process everything that happened. He's dealing with a lot of psychological stuff. A bunch of killings start happening in the wilderness around the town that he realizes, or at least assumes at the time, that they're all connected by certain details and there might be a serial killer. So he looks for help and requests the assistance of an FBI profiler who specializes in serial killers, the character that I created called Dr. Charles Mull. And he comes out to the small town to help the small town detective hunt for a serial killer in the wilderness in the mountains. The film's called Where Even Shadows Fear to Tread, which is a play on Where Angels Fear to Tread. It's really intense in certain places, but it's kind of like what we created was sort of a suspense thriller with a buddy cop atmosphere, because Marcus is this character who came from a land of order. He was in the military, but now he's thrown into chaos because he's no longer in the military. He left the military under dubious circumstances. He's got some psychological trauma he's got to deal with. So he's in a state of chaos. Charles is a person who exists in a state of chaos, applying order to his surroundings. Because Charles, as I explain it, is one bad day away from being a serial killer himself. And so he has many psychopathic traits that he actively fights against by rigid routine and behavior mod and everything that he's learned through his efforts at becoming a psychologist, researching these things, and ultimately being an FBI profiler. So he's a chaotic being applying incredible order to his life. So the two of them are literally broken people that once they start to work together, become one whole in their damage.
Okay, so not only is it a mystery, it's kind of a character study as well.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, that sounds like a very well-rounded story.
Yeah, we have a trailer that's on my Whimsyland YouTube channel, and it's also up on our Kickstarter page. It's really well done. Jared did most of the film work on that. There's a scene towards the end of the film, the trailer, where the character of Marcus is shown floating in like a inky black pool of water, and these arms come up out of the water and drag him down into it. That was my idea. It's a dream sequence that he was
Oh,
looking for things to represent trauma and represent the anxiety that he was feeling. And I said, well, why don't you do Arms in the Darkness? You know, he's trying to find his calm. He's trying to find his center, but something's pulling him away from that, and it wants to pull him into the depths. And then we were like figuring out how we were going to do it. Ultimately, decided on using water as the effect. It's a really, really well done trailer for our very small budget effort.
yeah.
Yeah. Jared's fantastic with the visual storytelling, and I won't claim to be the best author, but I will admit that I'm pretty damn good at it.
It's sounds like it's very serious as far as what you have going on with the visuals.
Yeah, he took a lot of the ideas that we created, and so far he storyboarded out these amazing scenes, not just in like the dialogue and the connection between the characters, but the visual details of what happens. And doing so when you've got no money for lighting and equipment and stuff like that, you have to get extremely creative. And he's a
Hmm.
master at that already.
Wow. So does he have a lot of back? I mean, obviously he did one movie already, but did he have a background prior to that, or did he just kind of
As far as I can
learn it
tell,
as he
it's
went?
pure talent,
Oh, wow.
because Missouri Breaks was his first film. Like he's done small budget video stuff around his town for like his church or for like some of the businesses and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
But if you watch Missouri Breaks, it's his visual style of storytelling is so engaging that you don't even realize that he's using lower equipment, and you don't even think about the fact that there's not a lot of set pieces involved because you're so engaged with what's going on the screen and what's being told to you and what the characters are saying, that by the time it's over you're like, that was awesome. And then you think, oh yeah, he did that with like no money. How the heck did he pull that off?
Yeah, you have to go check that Missouri Breaks, huh?
It's available on Amazon if anybody wants to watch it. I think it's also free on Tubi, and it's
Oh, okay.
definitely free on a Roku channel called the Madness Entertainment Group, because
Okay.
they're friends of ours. They do a lot of like comic book TV shows and stuff like that. But he made a deal with them to have Missouri Breaks, the Ballad of Missouri Bill, available to watch on their channel.
You're learning something new, like you said, new
I
challenge
love learning.
with the visual storytelling. I love to learn too. I don't like to just sit in what I know. If I do, I get bored.
Yeah.
I have to continue. It's like, give me something new. Let me learn something. Let me try something at least.
Yep. And like in my little bit of free time, if I'm not writing something else, like I said, I play video games. I tend to gravitate towards MMORPGs that have some sort of I guess you could call it Sims like aspect, like a housing system or something where you can build stuff. And that's what I tend to do when I play these games. Not so much play the games and do the storylines and stuff. I tend to just build things because I'm always in my head trying to figure out new ways to do something. And I use these systems and go, okay, well, I know I can build a wall out of these materials. How do I make that wall round? You know, stupid little stuff like that. It ends up being a puzzle that I can suss out within the
Uh-huh.
constraints of the game's mechanics. And I'm happy as a clam if I can make it happen, or I'm just really annoyed if the system won't let me do it the way I want it to look. But I'm always trying to play with something and make something new out of it, because my favorite quote is from Samuel Clemens, who most people know as Mark Twain,
Right.
which I'm not going to say it in its perfect form. I'll get as close as possible, but creative storytelling is like a kaleidoscope. You take a bunch of known ideas, you put them into it, you give it a twist, and it makes something different.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's my whole modus operandi. Take things that everybody knows, give it a twist, and make something different out of it.
And a lot of that comes from our each of our unique backgrounds too, because we're looking
Yep.
through our own lens.
Yep. The fundamentals are the same, but the perspective is different.
Exactly. Is there anything else you'd want to add? We're already actually going on quite a time here.
Yeah. I didn't even realize. No,
I know. I've
I'll
been enjoying the conversation, and it's just, oh, it's been almost 2 hours.
wow. Yeah, I guess my goal for the modern horrors books is always to have a new one produced by Halloween. So How to Build a Better Girlfriend will be ready for launch, and we'll be launching October 1st. And
That's
that's my
good.
schedule.
Are you doing anything in between that series then? Are you working on more Jizadai books, or are you, or Angel War books, excuse me, or are you going to just focus on the monsters?
Since I finished the Angel War arc, I kind of put G's that I aside for this year. My most immediate goal is to get Kevin finished with the illustrations and get Tales of Halcyon reforged, hopefully during the summertime. That'll satisfy the 2 books a year that I have set for myself as a goal. And then I have a couple of other projects, some standalone stuff that I'm not quite ready to talk about yet because I don't know how they're going to go.
And
Uh,
then you have the Saints Go Marching. How often are you going to try to put those out?
that one we need to really knuckle down on because it's been a full year since we produced Saints Go Marching, Mary and Joseph. I would like if we can get it going sooner rather than later, but I got to talk with Kevin. I would like to have a Santa Claus one based on Saint Nicholas, and there's another saint, but the two of them essentially combine to create the what we understand folklore wise of Santa Claus. So
Oh, okay. I see where you're, okay.
we wanted to do a Saints Go Marching book about the two of them and their lives, and bring it together under the theme of Santa Claus for kids, obviously. And I would
Oh, gotcha.
like to have that done by Christmas. So fingers crossed. If not, it'll be for Christmas 2027. Really all depends on time.
So if you can't get that one done this Christmas, would you work on another one to do in between before you could get that one for the next Christmas?
As of right now, no, because unfortunately, an artist can only go so fast.
Yeah. Well, you do have, like we said, a lot of irons in the fire. So,
Yeah, but if I have Kevin finishing up the Tales of Halcyon illustrations right now, if he can pull off completing all of the panel strips for Saints Go Marching for Santa Claus, we'll have it done and out by Christmas. But if that's not possible, I can't really expect him to do a whole nother one as well. He only has so many hours in the day.
yeah, it sounds like you've got your schedule laid out. You know what you're going to be doing, and you got an alternate plan if it doesn't work out.
Yep. But who knows? In the next couple of months, a new idea could hit me and I could be
I was
producing
just thinking
something
that.
totally new.
Yeah.
You'll know when I go, hey, this is almost done and this is what it
Yeah.
is. Check it out.
That sounds great. Well, it's part of putting things together in a new way, like you were saying, learning something new. It's the newness of it. It's the new shiny.
And becoming a master of it takes time. So
Yeah.
I focus, I get consistent about it. And I'm not going to get bored of something until I feel like I've successfully learned the skill in its entirety.
Then by the time you feel like you're master of one skill, you got to go on to the next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do we ever really stop learning though in that particular skill? It almost seems like there's another way to level up.
Always. You never stop learning. You stop learning, you're dying, and
Yeah,
nobody wants that.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for talking with me today. I will make sure all the links are in the description so people know where to find you. And we wish you luck with all your endeavors.
Thank you. I'm gonna
All
keep
right.
creating until I can't do it anymore.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.